Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York, 3rd of June, 2004, approximately 1:30 p.m. The interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Alan Ray David, July 22nd, 1926, Schenectady, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering the service?
High school.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was in study hall. Well, it happened on Sunday, so
Mhm.
we heard about it, but we listened to the president's speech on Monday in study hall.
Do you remember the reaction of yourself and your fellow students?
Well, I think we were all a little worried, but I don't remember that it affected us too much because I was in 10th grade at that time. And you know, we thought, well, maybe it'll all be over before we get drafted, which wasn't the case.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Yes, no, I was drafted.
Okay. Where did you go for your induction and your basic training?
I was inducted in Albany, and then they sent us to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and from there we went to Fort Knox for basic training. And
How long was your basic?
17 weeks. When I got out of basic training, our whole group went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and they would give you, we were there for probably a month, and they would give you a pass to anywhere in the United States as long as you could get back by the end of the weekend. So I was getting passes to come home, and on one of those passes I had an automobile accident, and I totaled the car and broke my jaw, wound up in Rhodes General Hospital up in Utica, the Army Hospital. And the group that I trained with, basic training, all went to Europe. And of course, while I was recuperating, which was a period of 8 weeks, I think I was in that hospital for 8 weeks, the war ended in Europe. So when I got back to Fort Meade, they put us on a troop train to Seattle to go to the Asian War, Asian Pacific War. And I think it took us about 8 days on that train to get to Seattle. And when we got there, there was no ship to put us on. So they sent us down to Oregon. I don't remember the name of the camp. It was below Salem, Oregon, I believe. Anyway, there was a major forest fire at the time, and all of the permanent cadre at that base were out fighting the forest fire. So we just kind of sat around there for, I think we were there for about a week, and then they had a ship come in to take us overseas, and we went back to Seattle and got on the ship. And that was in July of 1945, by the time we got on the ship. The ship was in a convoy, and the convoy grew as we went. I don't know where all these ships came from, but it started out a fairly small convoy, and then it got bigger and bigger, and we bypassed Hawaii, which was a kind of a disappointment to us all. But we did stop in the Marianas on a little island called Mog or something like that. And it was a tiny little island, and I think the highest point in the island was about 15 or 20 feet above high tide. But of course it was protected by a coral reef. And,
Now, were you assigned to a unit by this time?
no,
You were going as a replacement?
yes,
Okay.
yes, they were all replacements. And I remember seeing this island in a magazine sometime after the war, when the natives had returned to it. We just saw nothing but Navy personnel when we were there. But in this magazine article I saw on this very island later, there were beautiful Polynesian girls waltzing around topless.
They must have hid them from the GIs.
Yeah, I think they did. So anyway, from there, that was the only stop we made on the way over. And about an hour after that ship's paper came out that said war ends, we made a complete U-turn. And everybody thought, we're turning around and going home. It turned out they were just changing position in the convoy. And that was a big disappointment too. So anyway, we went on to Okinawa, and we got there. I'm not sure the exact date when we got there, but it was obviously after the war ended, so it was mid-August, I guess. I think it took us 28 days to get over there, traveling in this convoy.
Now, where were you when you heard, and do you remember your reaction to the death of President Roosevelt?
Well, he died in April of '45. I must have been in the hospital. That was when I was had the broken jaw, I believe. I don't remember that it impressed me any too much, because he had been very sick anyway.
Okay. All right, so when you went to Okinawa, what was your assignment there?
We first went to, as a replacement to, I believe it was the 716th Amphibious Tank Battalion. And then it was shortly after that group got to go home. They'd been over there for a couple of years, I guess. They got to go home as a group. So they moved us to this 536th Amphibious Tractor Battalion. And we were on the very southern tip of the island. In fact, it was, we were only maybe a half a mile from the cliff where the last of the Japanese soldiers jumped off the cliff and killed themselves. And there had been no cleanup when we got there. There were still bodies everywhere. And they never did pick up all the Japanese. We had, that summer, we had that fall, early fall, we had 2 typhoons. The first one was not too bad. It did some damage, but the second one just blew everything apart. It blew Quonset huts down. We were in tents, and it just tore the tents to ribbons. Didn't blow them away, they just stood there and tore all to pieces. And the first night of that storm, I woke up, my cot had sunk totally into the ground. I was lying in a puddle of water. And the next night we borrowed one of their amphibious tractors and slept in that, and that wasn't about to blow away. I think they weighed 28 tons or something like that.
What about tropical diseases? With all the dead bodies and that, I mean, was there like typhoid or anything like that?
Not that I know of. There was what do you want to call it, a warning of Japanese encephalitis. And they came up with a vaccine for it. And they took us all up to this medic station to get shots, this vaccine for Japanese encephalitis. And the very first man in line, they gave him the shot and he dropped dead.
Oh my God.
So they sent us all back again. I never did find out what was the matter with him. But it turned out it was not the shot. I don't know what, they just had a heart attack, I guess, or something.
Did you take Atabrint for malaria?
They treated the water. We didn't take it, no. It was,
Okay. Oh, I see. Put it in the water.
they put something in the water to protect us from malaria. But there were very few mosquitoes there. it actually was a rather nice climate there. Probably low temperature in the winter of 40, and that was an unusual day. And a high temperature in the summer of 90 maybe at the most. Of course, it's the influence of the ocean that keeps the temperature mild, I guess. But anyway, obviously we were heading for the invasion of Japan when we first started out. Of course, Okinawa was the staging area. And,
Now, where were you when you heard about the dropping the atomic bombs
on that ship.
on the ship? Do you remember the reaction when you heard about that?
Well, I think everybody was pretty much in awe of the thing, you know. And of course, when they dropped the second one, why, it ended the war, which was a big relief to everybody. I mean, we were heading for, we would have been in the invasion of Japan, which I'm sure would have been a horribly bloody battle.
Did it surprise you that you didn't turn around, that you had to do
Not really, no.
occupational duty?
Yeah, no, it didn't really surprise us.
What were some of your duties while you were in Okinawa?
We ran, because, of course, the war was over, we sat around for probably 2 or 3 months with nothing to do, really. Excuse me. And we were close to the ocean, right on the southern tip of the island. So we would go down on the beach, and there were still a lot of Japanese bodies on the beach. And then we had the first typhoon, and that's when we got this out. That first outfit went home, and we got moved to the other one, the 536th. And then the second typhoon hit, and as I say, it really tore things up. And the officers decided to fix up the area before they got new tents and stuff. So they went down on the beach and dug up sand and brought it up and made a beautiful area there. But and we didn't stay there very long, and we were transferred to Yantan Air Base, which was about maybe a third of the way up the island going north. And I think it was on the western side of the island. The natives were all stashed up on the north end of the island, and they were all off limits. I mean, nobody could go there. And this air base was very close to the border where you couldn't go any further north. And we ran an air transient center for military personnel who were traveling from Australia to Japan, or vice versa. And they would stop on Okinawa and spend the night. We would furnish bedding and meals. And then the next morning they'd go on their way. And that was our assignment for the rest of the time we were there. Except we moved from Yantan Air Base. I think they closed that down. And we moved to Naha Air Base. Naha was the capital. Of course, it was all obliterated when we were there.
So you didn't work in your MOS or anything then?
Pardon?
You didn't work in the MOS that you were trained for? Or?
No.
No.
Well, we were trained for the armored division, driving tanks and things, and there wasn't any need for it. But that island was just loaded with material for the invasion of Japan. They had tires stacked 20 or 30 feet high for acres and acres, and all kinds of airplane parts, and they gave it all to Chiang Kai-shek eventually, which didn't do him any good.
How long were you in Okinawa?
We were there until I think the end of September of 1946. I remember when we were at Yantan, of course, we had to feed these transients, and part of our job was working in the mess hall. And one day we would be assigned to distribute the food as they went through the line and do the dishes and stuff. The next day you would be on garbage detail, and the third day you had off. But the garbage detail, we drove to a big open area near the ocean that they had, in which they had dug a ditch with a big bulldozer. And this ditch must have been 10 or 12 feet deep and maybe half a mile long. And you would just back up to this ditch and dump your garbage into it. And it was full of slop at the bottom, maybe knee deep. And every time you backed up, there'd be a whole gang of natives. It was early after the war, and the Americans were not feeding the natives yet. There'd be a whole flock of natives in this ditch that run to catch anything edible that you dumped, And you could not put this garbage in the ditch without pouring it all over them. Yeah, it was tragic. By the time we moved from there to Naha, I think they had started feeding the natives, and they had started to let them back into their own villages, and they were still off limits. But as enlisted men, we had no opportunity for women. All the white women who visited the island, nurses, USO personnel, all those kind of people were automatically classified as officers, and enlisted men couldn't associate with them. So, and the natives were all off limits. Mm-hmm. They were allowed to come and work in the mess hall through the day, and the women worked in the mess hall and the men worked in the motor pool, but they were under guard all the time, and then were taken back home before dark. And we did have one girl that stayed there one night, and she went home with a truckload of cigarettes. But that was the only opportunity any enlisted man in our area anyway, had for a visit with a woman.
Now, where did you go after you left Okinawa?
Well, as I say, Okinawa was a fairly mild climate, and all we had were summer clothes by that time. And they put us on that ship, and we took a great circle route back to San Francisco, which took us way up by the Aleutian Islands, and we pretty near froze to death on that ship.
Now, you did mention on this form that you turned in that you were in Manila for their...
TDR&R, they call it, yeah. Temporary Duty Rest and Recuperation. Mm-hmm. We were there for, I think, 3 days. And the last day was their Independence Day. Mm-hmm. And they made us get back on the ship because they were afraid we'd get hurt with all the celebration. There were permanent personnel already. Mm-hmm. That were on shore, of course. Mm-hmm. But we were just visitors, so they made us get back on the ship. But they lit up the sky with fireworks that night. It was quite a display.
All right, so after you took the northern route home, where were you discharged and when?
Well, we went into Oakland Army Base, and from there, we were there for maybe 3 or 4 days. And then we were put on a troop train to come back to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and that's where I was discharged.
Mm-hmm. What rank were you when you were discharged?
PFC.
Hey, did you join any veterans organizations at all after your service?
I was in the American Legion for a little while, but not for long. I joined it in Galway at one point, and all those guys wanted to do was play cards. I'm not much of a card player. excuse me, I joined it up in Syracuse for a while, but I never went to any of the meetings or anything, so finally I did not keep it up.
Did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
Yes, yes, I went to the University of Kentucky for a year and Syracuse University for 2 years before the money ran out. So I should have stayed in Kentucky because the tuition was only $90 a year, something like that. At
Did you
that
ever
time.
make use of the 5220 club?
Yes, for a short time, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I came back in well, my discharge was actually in December. And of course it was too late to start college that year. So I took advantage of the 5220 club for a while because I couldn't go to college till in the fall.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you at all, or?
I borrowed $20 from a friend in San Francisco when we got back there, and because I didn't have a dime, and we had a pass to go into San Francisco from Oakland, and he loaned me $20, and when I got home I sent it back to him, and I guess he was impressed. Anyway, we corresponded for several years, and then it's kind of just faded away. I don't know whatever happened to him.
How do you think being in the service made a difference or changed or affected your life?
Oh, I think it makes you grow up a little faster than you might otherwise.
You were only, what, about 18 or so when you went in?
18, yes.
18.
Yeah. I graduated from high school in June of '44 and was inducted in November. So that's not much time to do much of anything.
Now, on your form, you said prior to entering the service, you were a part of the GE Victory Corps. What was that?
They had a program for high school students to work as messengers and clerks and that sort of thing to help out at the GE in Schenectady. Of course, it was a big deal then. And, you went to school, I think 45 or 50 minutes earlier than everybody else, and you got out at noon, and then you had to go down to the plant and work for 4 hours in the afternoon from 1 to 5. And it was a well populated program. There were a lot of kids doing it. So.
Did they pay you, or did you
Oh,
get...
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You also got credit?
45.5 an hour. No, you didn't get any school credit for it.
Okay.
But I mean, you put in your full school program before you got out at noon. You know? You didn't get to miss any classes or anything.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Oh, did you want to hold up a
Oh, yes, you're...
Oh, you wanted-
photo?
Okay.
Okay, this was in basic training?
This was, yes.
Okay, and,
It was a
okay.
panoramic camera, you know. You stand on a circular.
Now, are you able to point out where you are in there?
Here. I'm right there. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Right below your finger?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Now, as an armored replacement battalion, you had specialized armor training then?
Yes, we had to learn how to drive tanks. We had to learn how to do everything in the tank. Shoot the gun, load the gun. There were 5 people in the tank at that time. These were Sherman tanks, I guess. The driver, the co-driver, the gunner, the loader, and the, I don't know what you call them, who was ever in charge of the tank.
Tank commander.
Tank commander, right, there you go. Been a long time. And so we had to learn how to do every job there. And we also had to learn how to shoot all these things up to, well, we started with rifles, of course, and then we had to shoot these, I don't remember, if you don't remember the grease guns?
Mm-hmm.
We had to learn to shoot those, and we had to shoot 30 caliber machine guns and 50 caliber machine guns. And of course the 75 millimeter guns. These tanks were equipped with 75 millimeter guns. There was a newer tank that had 76 millimeter guns, so it was a much better gun, I guess. But for training purposes, they didn't have any of those. And we also had to learn how to drive half-tracks and Jeeps and virtually all the trucks that they had. And, when we went out on bivouac, you wind up your basic training with 2 weeks of bivouac. It rained cats and dogs. In fact, the Ohio River flooded that year, and it got quite deep, I guess. And we got, I don't know how many of these tanks we got stuck in the mud. We had an awful time. And they did ruin one tank trying to get it out of the mud, but it was an experience. When we got back to the barracks, of course we had to clean everything. Oh, what a mess. Trying to clean all that mud off of everything.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.